I'm here to tell you the most dirtiest player in the WNBA contract has been written, bro. And I'm here to tell you she's out for the season. Yes, you heard me correctly.
Revenge in sports doesn't always come with a slam dunk or a buzzer beater. Sometimes it unfolds in ways no one could have scripted. That's exactly what happened when Bria Hartley, a player long criticized for her rough style of play, was suddenly ruled out for the entire season with a devastating knee injury. For many fans, the first name that came to mind wasn't even Hartley's, it was Sophie Cunningham. Just months ago, Sophie was on the receiving end of Hartley's physical style, brushing it off publicly while others accused Bria of going too far now. With Hartley sidelined, fans are calling it nothing short of karma. The story has ignited debates across the league. Is this just bad luck or a chilling case of poetic justice? Today, we're breaking down why Sophie Cunningham might have gotten the last laugh in a way no one saw coming.
So Connecticut PR has released a statement Bria Hartley is to miss the remainder of the season.
Every league has that one player who seems to thrive on walking the fine line between competitiveness and chaos. And for years, Bria Hartley has carried that label in the WNBA, while her talent has never been in question. Her reputation has often been overshadowed by a string of incidents that left both opponents and fans questioning her approach to the game. To some, she was a fearless competitor who played with grit. To others, she was the enforcer who crossed the line too often, leaving a trail of bruises and grudges in her wake.
This is Bria Hartley right here, grinning from ear to ear, with Sophie Cunningham smiling.
It wasn't one single moment that defined Hartley's image, but rather a collection of plays where her physicality stood out more than her stat line. Fans vividly recall elbows thrown under the rim, hard fouls that seemed unnecessary, and a noticeable smirk when rivals were slow to get up. These weren't isolated flashes, they became patterns that fueled the narrative. And in a league that prides itself on sportsmanship and respect, that pattern put Hartley in a category all her own. One of the most talked about examples came during a heated matchup against Sophie Cunningham. Hartley's aggressive defense and relentless pressure escalated into a collision that left Sophie limping off the floor.
You can tell Bria Hartley, in my opinion, she launched herself into her knee. She did.
While medical staff confirmed it was a basketball play gone wrong, the optics painted a different story. Fans accused Hartley of playing dirty, and the whispers about her being a menace on the court only grew louder. It didn't help that Hartley never seemed rattled by the criticism. In fact, her body language suggested she welcomed the villain role, as if feeding off the boos that echoed from the stands. For Connecticut, this edge was seen as an asset. Every team wants a player who isn't afraid to do the dirty work, someone who can intimidate opponents and set a physical tone. But that edge came with a price. Opposing teams targeted her in retaliation, referees kept a closer eye on her, and fans increasingly viewed her as the antagonist of every storyline. Instead of being celebrated for her skill, she was defined by her style, rugged, unapologetic, and controversial. Over time, the reputation hardened into something Hartley couldn't shake. Whenever an opponent hit the floor, eyes immediately darted to her. Was she involved? Did she push too far? Even when accidents happened, the benefit of the doubt was rarely given.
The league does not take care of their players. And some people will be like, well, this happens in the NBA. No, it doesn't.
It was as though she had written herself into the role of the league's villain, and fans were more than happy to cast her there. This reputation set the stage for what would eventually happen next. When Hartley went down with a season-ending injury in practice, the narrative was already waiting. Too many observers, it wasn't just bad luck, it was the universe finally flipping the script on her. And in that moment, her reputation as the dirty player became the very lens through which the injury was judged. When news first broke that Bria Hartley had suffered a season-ending knee injury, fans immediately assumed it had happened in a game. After all, with her aggressive style and willingness to put her body on the line, an in-game collision seemed inevitable. But the truth was even more surprising. It wasn't an opponent or a heated playoff clash that brought Hartley down. It was her own team during a routine practice session.
It stated Connecticut Sun guard Bria Hartley will miss the remainder of the season due to meniscus tear in her right knee. Injury sustained during team practice. You got hurt at practice?
The Connecticut Sun's official statement confirmed the shocking detail: a torn meniscus in her right knee, sustained in practice, would sideline her for the remainder of the year. The announcement sparked instant disbelief across the league. How could one of the WNBA's most polarizing players, notorious for dealing out punishment on the court, be taken out by her own squad during a training drill? It didn't take long for the irony to sink in. For many, the situation felt like poetic justice. Bria, who once reveled in her reputation as a fearless and sometimes reckless competitor, had been sidelined in the most unglamorous way possible, not by an opponent's revenge, but by the unforgiving randomness of her own practice floor. This twist quickly became fuel for fans and commentators who had long criticized Hartley. To them, it was karma at work. Social media buzzed with comments, ranging from mocking laughter to outright celebration. Some even pointed out the cruel symmetry.
Hartley is expected to make a full recovery. So you mean to tell me her own team hurt her? Oh my God. Her own team hurt her? Oh man.
Hartley had injured opponents before, intentionally or not, and now she found herself on the receiving end. Others went further, saying the injury symbolized the end of her run as the league's enforcer. For the Connecticut Sun, however, there was no humor in the situation. Losing a player with Hartley's toughness was a serious blow, especially for a team already struggling to find consistency. Her presence, even if controversial, had been a weapon they relied on. Practices were meant to sharpen the team for battle, not dismantle their own roster.
Oh, dog, this is funny as hell. I should laugh, but damn, dog, how your own team hurt you, bro. Hartley is expected to make a full recovery. Additional updates will be provided. Oh, man, I did not know she got hurt at practice. Oh, damn. Now, we all remember this.
Now, with Hartley gone, the Sun were forced to reshuffle rotations and rethink their approach, all while dealing with the emotional cloud hanging over the locker room. What made the injury even more dramatic was the timing. Just as debates about Hartley's rough play were starting to fade, her absence thrust the controversy back into the spotlight. Instead of focusing on her recovery or her future, the conversation circled back to her reputation. Fans speculated whether her own intensity in practice had played a role in the injury. Did she push too hard? Was it the same recklessness that once rattled opponents now catching up to her? This injury was more than a setback. It was a turning point. It wasn't simply about a torn knee, but about what the moment represented in the wider narrative of her career. Hartley's reputation had already painted her as a villain in the league's ongoing drama. Now, the injury at practice turned her story into something bigger. A cautionary tale of how the same fire that fuels a player can just as easily burn them down. To fully understand why Bria Hartley's injury set the internet ablaze, you have to rewind to one of the most polarizing moments of her career, the collision with Sophie Cunningham. It was a hard play, the kind of under-the-rim battle that, WNBA fans know, can turn ugly in seconds. Hartley's aggressive defense sent Sophie stumbling, and while medical staff later confirmed it wasn't intentional, the optics told a different story. Sophie limped off, Hartley stood firm, and the crowd immediately chose sides. In the days that followed, outrage spread like wildfire. Fans accused Hartley of deliberately targeting Sophie, and the clip replayed endlessly across social media with captions calling her the dirtiest player in the league. For her critics, this was the smoking gun that proved what they had been saying all along. And while Hartley brushed it off, the moment etched itself into the league's memory. Sophie's response was what truly surprised everyone. Instead of firing back, she showed grace under fire. On podcasts and interviews, Sophie explained that she held no ill will toward Hartley. She described the play as a freak accident, saying she didn't believe Bria intended to hurt her. In a league where grudges often fester and rivalries define careers, Sophie's forgiveness stood out. She even defended Hartley publicly, telling fans not to take her mother's angry tweets seriously and insisting that the two remained on good terms. Still, Forgiveness from Sophie didn't erase the perception fans had of Hartley. In fact, it created a bizarre split. On one side, Sophie emerged, looking like the bigger person admired for her maturity. On the other, Hartley's silence and smirk during the fallout made her look like she didn't care, further solidifying her villain role. Every time Sophie took the court, the shadow of that collision lingered, reminding fans of the moment Hartley crossed the line. So, when Hartley was ruled out for the season with her knee injury, fans immediately connected the dots. For many, this was Sophie Cunningham's revenge, not through her own hands, but through the invisible hand of fate. The internet, filled with posts declaring karma, had finally caught up. Memes of Sophie smiling in the background spread quickly, as though she were the unspoken winner in a rivalry she had never asked for. The irony was undeniable. Sophie, the player who refused to paint Hartley as a villain, now looked like she had been avenged in the most unexpected way. Meanwhile, Hartley was forced to watch from the sidelines as her critics rejoiced. The narrative had shifted. What once was a battle between two players had turned into a larger story of justice, retribution, and the unpredictable ways the basketball gods deliver payback. For Sophie Cunningham, no statement was needed. Her silence was louder than words. For Bria Hartley, the injury became a mirror reflecting the reputation she had built. And for fans, it was the perfect storm of irony, drama, and karma colliding all at once. The moment the Connecticut Sun announced Bria Hartley was out for the season, social media turned into a frenzy. What should have been a straightforward injury update quickly became one of the most polarizing storylines of the WNBA season. Within minutes, fans flooded Twitter, Instagram, and comment sections, and the reactions were anything but sympathetic. For a portion of the fan base, this was nothing short of instant karma. Screenshots of Hartley's past collisions were reposted, with captions like "Poetic Justice" and "The Basketball Gods Don't Miss." Memes circulated showing Sophie Cunningham smirking, as if she had been avenged without lifting a finger. The language was sharp, almost celebratory, with fans openly mocking Hartley for the way her season had ended. To them, the injury wasn't a tragedy. It was a storyline reaching its inevitable climax, but not everyone was laughing. Another camp of fans pushed back against the idea of celebrating someone's downfall. They pointed out that, while Hartley had built a reputation for being physical, wishing injury on any athlete crossed the line. A torn meniscus isn't a minor setback. It can derail a career, affect future contracts, and change the course of a player's legacy. This group urged others to remember that behind the controversy was still a competitor who dedicated her life to the game. Their message was clear: criticize the play, not the player's pain. This clash of perspectives revealed a deeper divide among WNBA supporters. On one side were those who loved the drama, who treated Hartley like a villain in a movie whose downfall was part of the entertainment. On the other were fans who valued sportsmanship and felt the league couldn't grow if its followers reveled. In injuries, the comment sections read like a courtroom, with each side presenting its case passionately. Even former players and analysts joined the debate. Some noted that Hartley's absence might make the league safer, citing her history of hard fouls. Others emphasized that the WNBA had a growing problem with injuries in general, and that mocking Hartley distracted from the bigger issue. The conversation was no longer just about one player. It had become a reflection of how fans interpret justice, rivalry, and respect in professional sports. For the Suns supporters, the injury was devastating news. The team was already fighting for relevance, and losing Hartley meant losing a spark plug who, love her or hate her, brought intensity every time she stepped on the floor. For rivals, however, it felt like an open door. Some fans of opposing teams even commented that the league was safer without her. Echoing the long-standing complaints about her style of play, in the end, the online reaction showed just how powerful narratives can be in shaping perception. Bria Hartley wasn't just injured, she was cast into the role of villain brought low by fate. And while Sophie Cunningham remained silent, her name was on everyone's lips, tied to Hartley's downfall in every conversation. Bria Hartley's torn meniscus wasn't an isolated case. It was part of a much larger and troubling trend across the WNBA this season. By the time her injury was confirmed, fans and analysts had already been pointing out a staggering number: Of players sidelined with everything from ankle sprains to season-ending knee surgeries, the league was on pace for one of the highest injury counts in its history, sparking questions about whether something deeper was going wrong behind the scenes. Injuries are part of every sport, but the frequency and severity this year have stood out. Just a few weeks before Hartley went down, headlines were filled with updates about other stars missing extended time. Each new report fueled frustration among fans who felt robbed of seeing the league's best talent compete at full strength. For teams, it meant shuffled rotations, disrupted chemistry, and playoff hopes derailed before they even took off. For the league as a whole, it was a branding nightmare. A sport trying to grow in popularity can't afford to have its marquee names sitting in street clothes. What made Hartley's situation especially symbolic was how it fit into the growing narrative that the WNBA had become too physical. Games were turning into bruising battles where players weren't just competing, they were colliding. Critics pointed out that the officiating often allowed rough play to escalate unchecked, leaving athletes vulnerable to unnecessary contact. Hartley herself had built a reputation for thriving in this environment, often being the one dishing out the hits. But when the hammer came down on her in practice, it highlighted just how dangerous the culture of excessive physicality could be, even when no opponent was involved. Fans debated whether the league needed to re-examine its schedule, training methods, and officiating standards. Was the compressed season forcing players to push through fatigue, making them more prone to injury? Were coaching staffs demanding too much intensity in practices, creating the kind of environment that ended Hartley's year? Or was it simply the unavoidable cost of playing such a demanding sport at the highest level? These questions gained momentum as the list of injured players grew longer each week for players. The rise in injuries became both a personal and collective concern. Privately, many worried about their longevity in the league, knowing one wrong step could change their careers forever. Publicly, stars called for more investment in player health, from better facilities to advanced medical care. The voices grew louder as the league's most marketable athletes began missing games, leaving fans questioning whether the WNBA could truly sustain its momentum with so many stars on the sidelines. Bria Hartley's injury, then, was more than just another statistic. It became a symbol of a season defined by setbacks, a reminder of the fragility of careers, and a case study in how quickly the narrative can shift from dominance to disaster. In the broader conversation, her downfall wasn't just personal. It was part of an unsettling pattern that the league could no longer afford to ignore. For the Connecticut Sun, Bria Hartley's injury wasn't just another headline in a long list of league-wide setbacks, it was a direct hit to their foundation. Hartley might not have been the team's top scorer, but she was their emotional engine, the one who brought grit, edge, and an intimidating presence that opponents had to account for. Losing her to a season-ending knee injury meant losing more than just minutes on the court. It meant losing the identity that the Sun had, carefully built around toughness and relentless energy. Inside the locker room, the news landed with a mix of shock and resignation. Players knew the risks of practice intensity, but few expected to lose a teammate this way. For younger members of the roster, Hartley had been the veteran who wasn't afraid to get in opponents' faces and show them how to battle through adversity. Her absence left a leadership void that couldn't simply be filled by shifting rotations. Leaders like Alyssa Thomas suddenly carried more pressure to keep morale high and maintain the team's competitive fire. Strategically, the Sun were thrown into scramble mode. Coaches had to rethink lineups, redistribute minutes, and lean on players who hadn't been expected to shoulder such heavy responsibility. Hartley's physical style, while controversial, had also served as a protective shield for her teammates. Opponents often thought twice before going after Connecticut's stars, knowing Hartley would step in and respond with equal or greater force. Without her, the Sun lost that edge, and rival teams wasted no time in testing their toughness. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Sun were already fighting for playoff positioning, trying to prove they could hang with powerhouses like the Aces and Liberty. Losing Hartley right before the stretch run was like pulling a critical piece from an already fragile structure. Analysts openly questioned whether Connecticut could survive the grind without her, even if Hartley wasn't dropping 20 points a night. Her presence changed the way opponents approached the game. Now, without her, the Sun looked vulnerable. Fans felt the sting too. While many had mixed feelings about Hartley's aggressive reputation, they knew her fire was part of what made Connecticut dangerous. Message boards and comment sections lit up with concerns about whether the team could maintain its intensity. Some supporters admitted that as much as Hartley frustrated them with her fouls and controversial plays, she was the spark plug that made the Sun unpredictable and, at times, feared Dot from a broader perspective. Hartley's absence also exposed a fragile truth about the Sun's construction. They weren't a team built on overwhelming star power. They were built on grit, chemistry, and collective toughness. Remove one of the pillars, and the entire structure shook. Without Hartley, the Sun faced not just the challenge of surviving the season, but the reality of redefining themselves. Would they crumble without their enforcer, or would her absence force others to rise and transform the team's identity? One thing was clear: the fallout from Hartley's injury was bigger than a roster adjustment. It reshaped the Sun's season, tested their resilience, and left fans wondering if this would be remembered as the year Connecticut's fire was extinguished before it could truly burn. The moment Bria Hartley's injury was announced, the word karma echoed louder than any official statement. Across social media, fans, bloggers, and even casual observers framed her torn meniscus not as bad luck, but as cosmic payback for years of physical play. The idea spread quickly. Hartley, branded as one of the league's dirtiest players, was finally facing the consequences of the style that had earned her boos, criticism, and constant side-eye from rivals. But beneath the memes and hot takes, a deeper question lingered. Was this really karma, or just an unfortunate reality of professional sports? For those who believed in karma, the parallels were too obvious to ignore. They remembered Hartley colliding with Sophie Cunningham, leaving her bruised and limping, and the lack of remorse that followed. They pointed to other moments where Hartley seemed to relish her role as the aggressor, dishing out elbows and hard fouls that bordered on reckless. In their eyes, the fact that her own team's practice ended her season wasn't coincidence. It was poetic justice. The basketball gods, they argued, had finally balanced the scales. Yet, not everyone bought into that narrative. Many argued that celebrating an athlete's injury, regardless of reputation, crossed a moral line. Injuries don't just end seasons, they can end careers, threaten financial security, and cause long-term health issues. To laugh at Hartley's downfall, critics said, was to forget the human being behind the jersey. Even if she played with an edge, she was still a competitor who had worked tirelessly to reach the professional stage. From this perspective, labeling her misfortune as karma was not only cruel, but dangerous. Normalizing the idea that pain is deserved if someone is disliked enough, the debate revealed a divide in how fans engage with sports drama. Some see players as characters in a never-ending story, where villains eventually meet their downfall in satisfying fashion. Others emphasize the real-world stakes, careers, livelihoods, and legacies that go beyond entertainment value. Hartley's injury sat at the center of this tug-of-war, forcing fans to choose between indulging in the drama or respecting the athlete. Even Sophie Cunningham's earlier comments added weight to the discussion. She had defended Hartley, insisting their collision was accidental and that she held no grudge. If Sophie herself could forgive, was it fair for fans to treat the injury as revenge? Or did her grace only highlight the contrast between Sophie's sportsmanship and the internet's appetite for schadenfreude? In the end, the karma debate became bigger than Hartley. It reflected how fans interpret justice in sports, whether they believe fate punishes those who cross the line, or whether injuries are simply the brutal price of competition. For Hartley, the narrative was already written. To her critics, she got what she deserved. To her defenders, she was another victim of a league riddled with injuries. And somewhere in between lay the uncomfortable truth that sometimes tragedy and irony collide in ways that blur the line between justice and cruelty. Bria Hartley's injury may have been the flashpoint for debates about karma, but its ripple effects stretched far beyond one player. It forced the WNBA, its fans, and its athletes to confront uncomfortable truths about the culture of the league. When the reaction to an injury becomes more entertaining than the game itself, it highlights how fragile the balance is between competition, safety, and the narratives that fuel fan engagement. For the league, Hartley's absence was a reminder of how quickly storylines can turn toxic. On one hand, controversy sells the debates, the memes, the finger-pointing, all kept the WNBA trending. But on the other hand, celebrating injuries undermines the league's efforts to present itself as a platform of empowerment and resilience. When fans cheer for sidelined players, it risks creating an image problem the WNBA cannot afford as it battles for more media attention and respect in the sports. World coaches and executives also had to take notice. Hartley's downfall in practice raised uncomfortable questions about training intensity. Was the league pushing its athletes too hard with condensed schedules and physical practices? With injury counts already climbing this season, some insiders suggested systemic changes were necessary, from better medical support to re-evaluating how teams prepare during the grind of summer. Basketball. Without reforms, the fear was simple. Today, it's Hartley. Tomorrow, it could be another star whose absence damages the product on the court. For players, the conversation was more personal. They saw in Hartley's injury both the cruelty of fate and the fragility of their careers. Every time a peer went down, it underscored how fleeting success could be. It wasn't just about Hartley's reputation or her style of play. It was a reminder that in the WNBA, even one misstep in practice could alter the trajectory of a season, or worse, an entire career. That realization deepened calls for improved player welfare, better facilities, and more accountability from league officials. Fans, meanwhile, were left divided. Some relished the drama of Hartley's karma, treating it like the natural arc of a villain's storyline. Others bristled at the lack of compassion, warning that glorifying injuries set a dangerous precedent. That tension revealed how the WNBA is still defining its identity in the modern sports landscape. Is it a league that thrives on controversy, rivalries, and drama, or one that holds itself to a higher standard of respect and sportsmanship? Ultimately, Hartley's injury wasn't just about her. It was about how the league, its athletes, and its fans interpret justice, handle conflict, and react to adversity. The bigger picture showed a crossroads. Either the WNBA uses moments like this to spark growth, addressing safety and reshaping narratives, or it risks letting controversy overshadow competition. Because when an athlete's downfall generates more buzz than their performance, the league has to ask itself what story it truly wants to tell moving forward. Bria Hartley's season-ending injury may have looked like just another medical update on paper, but the reaction it sparked told a much larger story. For some, it was the ultimate example of karma, a player long criticized for her physical style finally sidelined in a twist of fate. For others, it was a sobering reminder that injuries are never something to celebrate, no matter who the athlete is. Sophie Cunningham's quiet grace, in contrast to the loud online chatter, only deepened the irony, making Hartley's downfall feel like an unspoken victory for her rival. But beyond the memes, the jokes, and the debates, this moment exposed the fragile reality of professional sports. One play, one practice, one step can change everything. As the WNBA moves forward, the conversation lingers. Was this justice, cruelty, or simply the unpredictable hand of the game itself?